Oh, you know what would be a really good idea? If we did Michael Jackson's Doesn't Matter If You're Black or White. Because it goes with the theme, man.
I like this song though. So I'm assuming we're just gonna video ourselves.
Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it on. I don't know, but it's coffee time
with Alyssa
and Andrew,
and we're gonna talk about
race. We're gonna talk about race in society because it is such a big problem.
And we're going to talk about 2 specific articles. We're going to watch some videos, do some research.
We're going to vent our feelings.
This is definitely a vent sesh.
There are a lot of feels going on about
And
race.
we're also going to attempt to connect our personal lives and things like that nature with these topics and these readings. And we're also going to talk about our futures as
hopes and
educators.
Dreams.
And that's going to be coffee talk today.
It's going to be coffee talk today. I'm so excited. All right, so we read Disconscious Racism and Race, Some Teachable and Uncomfortable Moments, respectively by Joyce E. King and Heidi Tolentino. First of all, let's discuss Heidi Tolentino's Race, Some Teachable Moments. And so that article was a lot about an experiment she did with her own class where she engaged her students in a very uncomfortable situation where a question of race came up. She says, "You can never know what it's like to be black." And she said this in a class full of white students. And I think that is probably one of the best things any teacher's ever done because they can't know what it's like to be black. You don't. And I think that's great because you can do all you want with that white guilt and you'll never be able to understand and really try and sympathize, I guess is the word I would use. And so you're stuck kind of just feeling sorry for us, which is, in a way, it's like an insult, but at the same time, it's not. So I feel like this article did a really good job of explaining the elephant in the room, and they put a picture of an elephant in a classroom on the article, and I think that's kind of funny, little visualization. So in the reading, it talks about issues that are about students growing up never understanding what it's like to put themselves in another person's shoes because they aren't part of that race. And so personally, I feel I grew up in all white schools. And I was
I do too.
Well, yeah, you're white. But I'm black, so I was like 1 out of 5 black people in my middle school. And then high school got a little bit better. But there still weren't very many. There were like 20 of us in our graduating class, I think.
Yeah, I didn't even know that.
You didn't know that?
I didn't know. I think when I was little, I didn't have enough exposure to different races. I always knew that I felt that personally the color of someone's skin didn't even matter to me, but I knew it mattered to my family. And specifically, one time I remember was that my mom and my Nana went to go Christmas shopping for me, and they were going to pick out a baby doll for me. And it was one of the first times that they had seen a black baby doll. And the baby doll that I wanted for Christmas didn't come in white that year. And they refused to buy the black baby doll for me. And so I didn't get the baby doll I wanted, but after I had found this out when I was older, I felt really upset about it, and I asked my mom why, and she said, well, because it didn't look like you. But always to me, I questioned, well, why does it matter if it didn't look like me? It's still...
Right. Was it an American Girl doll, or...?
No, it was just a baby doll.
Just a baby doll, okay.
It's just a baby doll. But I think that goes to show how, like, within my family, and especially because a lot of my family is from the South, and we all kind of migrated north, it just goes to show, even if you live in a region, like, we live very close to Chicago, so even if you live in a region like that, you're never going to get enough exposure because of the way that you think personally and because of what you have been exposed to and what you have learned personally.
Yeah, and I think that it really does matter about your heritage, like how you're raised. I mean, you can always have a different perspective than the rest of your family, and that's what's going to cause problems, I think, down the line when you have your own kids and when you get into your own career, and it's going to conflict with your own ideas, because that can set you on edge. And that doesn't work for just family, that works for anybody. And I know for me, when I was in a southern part of Indiana, it was me, my sister, and my dad, and we were all black, and then it was my mom, who's white, and we would get not necessarily dirty looks, but more like questioning looks as we would walk down the sidewalk together, like to the pool or something. And I mean, just to be in an area where people are not necessarily consciously racist, let's loop that one in, disconsciously racist, where they are not thinking about their prejudices, but more just acting on them, and not necessarily acting on them, but it's sort of like a passive sort of racism, where they are sort of just kind of spacing out about it and letting their thoughts and prejudices take over. And so I think that issues in both of these articles are that if you don't teach the generation that, hey, this is a problem, that, you know, society has these sort of glass ceilings that aren't based around, you know, feminist movements like it's usually put in, but more of a racial standpoint, you're going to see that solidarity of white people amongst racial solidarity is going to win every time. For example, in To Kill a Mockingbird, the people of the jury, don't laugh at me, because it's a true thing, it's a real thing.
No, it is.
The people of the jury in To Kill a Mockingbird, when they are trying Tom Robinson, they all, you know, they're all poor white farmers in the middle of Macomb, Alabama, and they all sided, you know, for the vote of guilty when really he is innocent. There's enough evidence to prove that he is, just from his testimony, and that he dies anyway, and he's sentenced. We tried for an appeal, but he's sentenced to death no matter what. I mean, he escapes and he gets shot. But the point is that, you know, white people are going to side with themselves, and we have to. As the generations go on, though, I mean, yes, things have changed, but it's still going to be a problem for those from the baby boomer era, those who have passed on those values to their kids. I feel like a lot of Southerners have done that. I don't know. I mean, your Nana, she's a little wicked in her ways, I feel.
Yeah, we've actually had a discussion about you.
Oh, really?
And, you know, ever since I was little, I feel like I've always been a feminist, and it started off with just being myself and being a woman, but now I realize that feminism is more about equality, and I've just learned so much from people around me and experiences around me. But like I said, majority of my family's from the South, and you know, my family's very proud about how we are from the South, and our ancestor is Thomas Jefferson.
Okay.
And how proud they are that we're related to him in some way. And every time that that's brought up, you know, I just think about all of the horrible things he did that were a part of that time, but obviously it was extremely racial.
Right.
But anyways, yes, I've had a discussion with my Nana about you, and she has been set in her ways, but she is getting more and more set in her ways, and she always questions me and looks at me with funny looks because one of my best friends is black and is on the LGBTQ spectrum. So it's always interesting to see how the baby boomers and people in the South in general deal with
the gray
those
of
things.
America.
Like when I read To Kill a Mockingbird, I was like, oh, this book is about the South. I'm from the South. My family's in the South.
And then you read
I can't
it
wait to
again.
go to the South. And then I read the book again, and I was like
Oh.
questioning what I was thinking because it's such a racial book. I mean, I don't think there's a sentence in there that
No,
has
there's
nothing
not.
to do. I mean, it always has to do with race. So
I mean, when I first read it in 8th grade, or my junior year in high school, I didn't really read it. I was like, okay, I'm just going to flow through the words because this book is old and it doesn't matter. Reading it again, I'm like, oh my god. What is this?
well, it's just really sad that, like, people say that To Kill a Mockingbird and other books that relate to race and even other topics like race that people find scary to talk about
Right.
are being taught, but teachers themselves are not.
They're afraid.
Yeah, they're afraid. They're not using them in the proper ways to inform students, and not only inform them, but expose them to those difficult topics that, you know, I grew up not talking about those topics. And even though, yeah, it was great that I was already a feminist in my own head, and I always told myself that I wasn't racist and that I don't have privilege and that I feel like I'm on the same level with everyone, but I will never be on the same level as everyone.
Right.
Because I'm white and I'm a female.
It's just nothing you can control either. That's
Right.
Just, it's the pillars of society that won't come crumbling down. And I really think that from a multicultural perspective, that those pillars of white privilege and gender privilege, even, because that's where that whole vortex of circumstances come into play. How I'm a black man, and because I'm a man, I'm supposed to have more privilege and power, yet a white woman's going to have more of it because she's white.
Right.
And I know that those times have changed since then, but it's still, in a lot of situations, it's very heavily influenced on that. Like in a workforce, for example. Like, say we're going for a teaching job. You and I are both going for the same teaching job. You're more than likely going to get that job. A, because you're female. B, because you're white. C, more than likely because of the area. Although I feel if they were going to do a ghetto area, like Chicago suburbs, I don't think they'd give you the job. I feel like they'd be too scared to give you the job. So from that Teachable Moments article, when I read it, I reacted like, wow, this is really smart. I wish I thought of this, because they talk so much about how the black community is seen as sort of not to say untouchable, like how we would in India with the reincarnation in the caste system. Untouchables who are, the filthy grind people. You don't even look or speak and acknowledge them. They're like slaves, but they're not even slaves. They're like lower than slaves. But it's not to say that they're untouchable. It's to say that they are beneath you in a white power society. And we were talking with Ray Peterson about the N-word and how she's not afraid to use it. That really made me uncomfortable. I don't know about how it made you feel.
I felt awkward about it because didn't she say that she didn't
want to give the word power
Right.
to be afraid of it.
But going ahead and saying that you don't want to give the naughty word power is giving it power because
Right.
you're scared of it. You're scared to use it. You're scared to see what other people are going to think. And going back to Kill a Mockingbird, because that was the only racially inclined book that I read in high school, you know, I was one of the first people in my class to say nigger or to say Negro in the class because we read the book out loud.
And they're all so
And
scared
everyone
of it.
else was like skirting around it, and we didn't have anyone in my class that was a different skin tone, of a different race. I'm sure ethnic backgrounds are different, obviously, but it was just, and looking back on it, it's just really sad to see how people give words, other people, text, I don't know what else. Symbols, other things like that, the power that we all say we don't want to give to them.
But we do it anyway.
But because we bring it up and we're nervous about it, it's already giving those things power. We shouldn't have to think about it. We should just do it.
I mean, for me, when she said that, I was like, just because you say you don't want to give it power and you're not afraid to use it, doesn't mean you go ahead and use it. You have two kids who are of that culture, of that background, where the N-word was used.
And I think, like, one thing that she could have asked, I know that my honors English teacher in 9th grade asked us if we were comfortable.
Right, she could have asked if we were comfortable with her using it.
Because there are two people in the class that are from that culture and have those backgrounds, I think it would have been smarter to say, hey, does it bother you that we're going to go ahead and use these terms or talk about these things in the way that we're going to talk about them? Because if you were going to go ahead and teach about those things, those moments shouldn't be awkward. They should be full and lively.
They should be productive and educational. And I think that's where that disconscious racism comes back in again, because it's not that she was unaware of us or that she didn't think to ask. It's that she did it without asking, and she just kind of assumed it would be okay.
Right.
And I feel, and that really kind of bugs me, especially because she is an LGBTQ affiliate.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, if I said the word lesbian or another variation of that word, I feel she would be very offended, especially coming from her cultural background and who she is today.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, all the stories she tells us in class, I feel like, first of all, she's already kind of like shunned from her family.
Well, it was really sad to me to see, oh, well, she has a ring on her left hand, so she's married, and she skirts around bringing up
LGBT
the topic of LGBTQ.
Inclinations. Yeah.
And it took her several months to finally put it out in the open and talk about those things comfortably. So nothing, I mean, that's her personal life, but... and
it's not like we're supposed to invade on her personal life at all. That's all her choice to reveal it or not.
But the way that she went about it and in talking about her personal life and making us question those things and kind of making that subject uncomfortable, I think was a moment
unprofessional. I would say unprofessional.
And I would say that, I mean, it could have been a really teachable moment. We're all in some kind of department in our class that deals with education, dealing with other people, writing, reading, anything. So it's difficult to see how professors, instructors, and teachers are so uncomfortable with the facts of life and things that we have to deal with, we've been dealing with, and it's sad to see that the 21st century is still showing those signs.
And it's just that uncomfortability that they have to push through, and that we have to do as the next generation of teachers. And I think that's really what that article is about. Being able to find methods to teach our future classes. Like taking To Kill a Mockingbird and so deeply analyzing it. Though it's going to be taught in a high school class, you have to deeply analyze that book. You have to take the 2 to 3 weeks where you sit down, read the book, and go over every piece of it, and then research it like we are. And I know it's a lot of work, especially because it's a college version of the work that they would do in high school. But I feel like it needs to be done in order to educate and keep bringing up, a better society to rebuild those pillars to where it says, hey, it's okay to not fear these words. It's okay to not fear them, but make sure you use them in a social context that is acceptable and no one's going to, flip out on you.
Right.
And so I think when we talked in class about or when we watched the CNN video, that really got my goat, because they were being uncomfortable with the situation, and because of the pillars of their society and I really feel like that's just a news network thing, that they have to kind of be biased about it. I think that's more of that disconscious racism thing, where they're like, we're gonna feel the way we feel, even though you tell us differently. That's probably more accurate.
But we're going to go ahead and talk about it in front of America to get our point across still.
And I feel like that's just... it's an ignorant sense of self. You're really kind of just blowing yourself out of the water when the facts are getting tossed at you like live grenades.
Right. And
you don't know how to recover. So you just keep going with what you've heard over and over and over, trying to convince the other person, who is clearly an expert and clearly well-rounded enough to know when you're stupid, and I mean it, literally stupid, to not know the difference between what's actually right and what you've been told is right.
Shall we go ahead and rewatch the video?
I think we should rewatch the video. I really want to have a...
For clarification, let's go ahead and say the title.
Reza Aslan slams Bill Maher for facile arguments about Muslim violence.
All right, this is with CNN, by the way.
Others disagree and point to the primitive treatment in Muslim countries of women and other minorities.
God.
Now we're joined now by Reza Aslan, a scholar of religions and professor at the University of California.
He's so happy to be there.
I know, he just looks so cheery. I really want to read that book, too.
Let's talk about this because it's a very interesting conversation every time we have it. Before we get into this discussion, I want to play for you this clip from Bill Maher's show just this Friday night. Here it is.
President Obama keeps insisting that ISIS is not Islamic. Well, maybe they don't practice the Muslim faith the same way he does. But if vast numbers of Muslims across the world believe, and they do, that humans deserve to die for merely holding a different idea, or drawing a cartoon, or writing a book, or eloping with the wrong person, not only does the Muslim world have something in common with ISIS, it has too much in common with ISIS. There's so much talk. You can applaud here.
Oh
okay, so right there. How many American religions, though, do the exact same thing? Christianity, if you sleep with someone else, or you sleep with someone before you're wed, like immediately from biblical times, you're stoned. That's it, right there. You're done. You've broken the word of God, and you're toast. And then as an agnostic individual, I feel like that's really idiotic that he would say that.
You know what I think is idiotic?
What?
That he thought he deserved applauses
for
for something so stupid.
Oh, like how he just... You can applaud. It's okay. Go ahead.
It's sad to see that, like, he has so much control over his audience and the people watching his show that he feels it necessary to go ahead and okay their applause.
I see, that's that uncomfortable, disconscious racism thing again, where they're like, okay, well, because he's famous and I'm on his show, I'm in his audience, I feel like I need to agree with him because that's sort of how I feel, or I don't have an opinion.
Right.
I'm going to let him decide it for me. And so that prejudice that's lying in wait in the murky waters of the racism pond, here it comes. And I feel like it just bothers me that people are they're like sheep. They're literally sheep being herded into a racism cloud. I'm sorry.
Let's finish the video.
5 or 6 minutes about that, talking about circumcision for women, not respecting the rights of women, not respecting the rights of gay people. And what's your reaction? And then we'll talk.
Well, I like Bill Maher. I've been on this show a bunch of times. He's a comedian, but frankly, when it comes to the topic of religion, he's not very sophisticated in the way that he thinks.
Nope.
I mean, the argument about the female genital mutilation being an Islamic problem is a perfect example of that. It's not an Islamic problem.
It's
an
an everywhere problem.
Hold on a second, because he says it's a Muslim country problem. He says that in Somalia.
Yeah, but that's actually
It's incorrect.
Incorrect. It's a Central African problem. Eritrea has almost 90% female genital mutilation. It's a Christian country. Ethiopia has 75%.
Hit him with the
female
facts.
mutilation. It's a Christian country. Nowhere else in the Muslim.
Hey, you know what I think is funny?
What?
That all of the countries he listed were Christian, and they do the genital mutilation.
Yeah. Talk about it.
Like that.
But I feel like that's not so much a religious thing as it is a cultural thing, which is what he's saying.
Right.
Is that because of the area and the region and the tribal...
I think by him saying that it was in Christian countries was to kind of get on their level.
Right,
because
it was
they
kind of
don't know
just
what they're
fire
talking
back.
about. Right.
To be honest, though, for the most part, it's not a free and open society for women in those states.
Well, it's not in Iran. It's not in Saudi Arabia. It certainly is in Indonesia and Malaysia. It certainly is in Bangladesh. It certainly is in Turkey. I mean, again, this is the problem, is that you're talking about a religion of 1.5 billion people, and certainly it becomes very easy to just simply paint them all with a single brush by saying, well, in Saudi Arabia, they can't drive, and so therefore that's somehow representative of Islam. It's representative of Saudi Arabia.
But
In
hold on,
Iran, they don't have...
I think that Bill Maher's point is that these aren't extremists. We often talk about extremists and that we should crack down on extremists, and why aren't Muslims speaking out about extremists? In Saudi Arabia, when women can't vote and they can't drive and they need permission from their husband, that's not extremists. Why aren't we talking more about what? That's not extremist, that's commonplace. Why don't we talk more about the commonplace?
Why is that commonplace, though?
That shouldn't be
Who are
commonplace.
you to judge that that's commonplace?
Compared to the rights and responsibilities of women, Muslim women around the world. It's an extremist way of dealing
But
with
it's not
it.
extremist in that. It's not extremist in that country in Saudi Arabia. That's the norm.
Oh, no,
That's
it's
what
not.
you're saying.
I mean, look, Saudi Arabia is one of the most, if not the most extremist Muslim country in the world. In the month that we've been talking about ISIS and their terrible...
And see, right there is where he tripped himself up because he used the words
Syria,
Muslim
Saudi
country.
Arabia, our closest ally, has beheaded 19 people. Nobody seems to care about that because Saudi Arabia sort of preserves our national interests. You know,
Okay.
this is the problem, is that these kinds of conversations that we're having aren't really being had in any kind of legitimate way. We're not talking
Whoa,
about...
there we
Shots
go.
fired!
It's the truth, though. Like, we don't talk about
No, we
any of
don't.
these things.
We watch the news and listen to people who claim to be experts about it, and that's it.
And you know what I
You
think
just
is
take whatever
funny?
they say.
How people think that they're being taught in school systems and going off to college to become businessmen and women, and then they go out into the world and they don't know how to deal with different cultures.
No, they don't.
And that obviously shows that we're
On
not,
CNN,
we're
that
not-
shows as the interviewees,
we're not
the
doing
interviewers.
what we're supposed to be doing in education if there's still kids and young adults coming out of school and college and not understanding that multiculturalism is a thing.
Yeah.
So when it comes to their ultimate goals, Hamas is ISIS, and ISIS is Hamas. And what they share in common, all militant Islamists share in common.
So Reza, the question at the bottom of the screen that everyone is looking at: does Islam promote violence?
Islam doesn't promote violence or peace. Islam
That's
is
like
just a
saying,
religion
does
like
Christianity
any religion
promote
in the world.
violence?
It depends on what
Does-
you bring to it.
Does
Does
Christianity-
Catholicism in general promote violence?
And I mean, it like he says, it focuses on that historical context of how it was used throughout the ages. And so if you go back to biblical times, as so we're suggested from the Bible and Christianity, we're told that, hey, treat your buddies right or we're going to stone you to death.
You don't think that there's anything more, there's the justice system in Muslim countries, you don't think is somehow more primitive or subjugates women more than in other countries.
Okay, right there. Right there. As a woman, she said that.
Repeat what she said for me.
How women are being subjugated and treating as a lesser group of people in these Muslim countries.
Okay, the problem with that is that that's happening everywhere, okay? And
It's
that's
called the
something that we
feminist
have
movement.
to deal with.
The feminist movement. Oh my gosh. And then he goes on to say,
What you just said? You said in Muslim countries. I just told you that Indonesia, women are absolutely 100% equal to men. In Turkey, they have had more female representatives, more female heads of state in Turkey than we have in the United
Yes,
States.
but in Pakistan,
Stop saying things like
in
Muslim
Pakistan, women are
countries.
still being stoned.
And that's
to
a
death.
problem for Pakistan.
So
You're
in
right.
other words,
So
you,
let's
I
criticize
just want to be clear on what your point is, because I thought you and Bill Maher were saying the same thing. Your point is that Muslim countries are not to blame. There is nothing particular. There's no common thread.
there's just no such thing as a Muslim country.
With a broad brush, that somehow their justice system or Sharia law or what they're doing in terms of stoning and female mutilation is different than in other countries like Western countries.
Stoning and mutilation and those barbaric practices should be condemned and criticized by everyone. The actions of individuals and societies and countries like Iran, like Pakistan, like Saudi Arabia must be condemned because they don't belong in the 21st century.
Exactly.
Thank you.
You say Muslim countries as though Pakistan and Turkey are the same, as though Indonesia and Saudi Arabia are the same, as though somehow what is happening in the most extreme forms of these repressive countries, these autocratic countries, is representative of what's happening in every other Muslim country, is frankly, and I use this word seriously, stupid. So let's stop doing that.
Okay, Reza, let's listen. I want to listen to Benjamin Netanyahu again. This is actually the one I wanted you to hear.
Yeah, the ISIS.
Our hopes and the world's hopes for peace are in danger because everywhere we look, militant Islam is on the march. It's not militants. It's not Islam. It's militant Islam. And typically, its first victims are other Muslims, but it spares no one.
He's making a clear distinction there. He says it's not militants, it's not Islam, it's militant Islam. Do you understand his distinction there? Is he correct?
Well, he's correct in talking about militant Islam being a problem. He is absolutely incorrect in talking about ISIS equaling Hamas. That's just ridiculous. No one takes him seriously when he says things like that. And frankly, it's precisely
That's a good
why
comparison of
under his leadership,
popular
Israel
religion
has become so
to
incredibly
another.
isolated.
That's like saying Christianity is the KKK.
Are illogical, they're irrational.
Yeah.
Southern Baptist is the
Yeah.
KKK.
In fact, he went so far as to then bring up the Nazis, which has become kind of a verbal tick for him whenever he brings up either Hamas or ISIS. Again, these kinds of oversimplifications, I think, only cause more danger. There is a very real problem. ISIS is a problem. Al-Qaeda is a problem. These militant Islamic groups like Hamas, like Hezbollah, like the Taliban...
It's sad that we can't just acknowledge separate things like ISIS and the religion of Islam as completely separate things. We have to group them together.
Right.
Into bigotry by simply painting everyone with a single brush, as we have been doing in this conversation, mind you.
Well, we're just asking the questions, Reza, and you're answering. I think you answered very fairly. We appreciate it. Thank you, Reza Aslan.
Appreciate your perspective.
Yep.
We appreciate your perspective.
Your
That
opinion,
gets me every time.
your opinion doesn't matter. Oh my gosh, that drives me off the wall.
We're just doing our jobs.
So I think when it comes to us being teachers, we just need to find things like that, find books and source material that students can use to educate themselves. So, like a video or To Kill a Mockingbird or another sort of book that really sort of opens up their eyes and creates an ability to have a conversation where they don't have to feel afraid to ask questions or feel afraid to use certain language.
Right. I feel like it's really upsetting. It's upsetting to me personally that the education system within schools is still making specific timelines for how much you're supposed to talk about race.
Right.
Like, it's just like saying, oh, Black History Month. It's just 1 month.
Focus on this 1 month to talk about black people.
Why can't we focus
them
on multiculturalism throughout the entire school year? Why can't that be a thing? Is it too difficult for us to deal with?
No, and it's not that it's too difficult to deal with. It's just that, the government decided we're going to have a month of Black History. So this is how the school sees, we'll just respect this and we won't talk about it ever again. Instead of separating themselves from the government and the style of education to celebrate that multiculturalism throughout the whole school year or celebrate it on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I definitely think that would be my biggest question is why can't we celebrate different cultures daily? Why does that have to be a specific day, a specific week, a specific month? Why can't we just let it run through the entire school year as teachers and educators?
And I feel like that's a curriculum thing that we have to change with the Bennett framework, that to change the curriculum and change the administration and change how teachers are, they need to be more culturally competent. I honestly think that any teacher who didn't take actual teaching classes needs to go back and take teaching classes or classes that are going to engage them in uncomfortable cultural questions that really make them question if they decided to be a teacher just because they thought it'd be easy, if they wanted the breaks. They thought it would be fun. They thought it would be fun, instead of actually culturally challenging and educationally challenging their students and themselves.
Right.
And so I feel like us, we are learning better to do all of that for when we become teachers. But I feel like if people aren't given the chance to actually educate themselves, I feel like it's just going to smack them in the face. I really do. They're going to try and teach something that they don't understand and that they are unconscious or unaware of, that really it's just going to hurt them in the long run and hurt their students that they're trying to teach. And I feel like it's just going to hurt society, because those students are going to be the ones who inherit society and develop it even further.
Right.
So, I mean, if I wanted to know anything more about, uncomfortable questions or, people who aren't really aware of things, I would actually go back and ask my high school teachers, what do you want to talk about when you teach? Not what the curriculum says. What do you, as a person, as an educator, as an individual of society, what do you want to teach? What do you want to learn about? What do you want your students to learn about? What sort of cultural aspects are important to you that you would consider your students needing to know about as well? And I'm not sure if there are many books about that. I mean, I'm sure there is a plethora of books that, go delve into different topics of all sorts of things. But to try and squeeze as many large books as you can into a year is just going to be too difficult to do.
Right.
I don't know. The Help works out really well for that. Looking at that aspect of segregation.
I think the biggest problem with The Help being, I don't really think I've ever heard of it being taught in schools, but I think it's a really good book
I really think it should be taught in schools. I think it should replace To Kill a Mockingbird, in fact.
With The Help. I think that reading
it.
a book like The Help gives you so many more perspectives, especially as a white woman and someone who is deeply rooted into the South.
Right.
I think reading something like The Help just shows you, wow, people that are probably my grandparents' ages now, how they treated people back then is just devastating to even think about. I mean, reading the words through that book is just so powerful, and it definitely gave me a different perspective. And again, I looked at it before I read it, before I watched the movie. I was like, oh, this is great. It's another book about the South. I'm so excited.
And then you read it.
And just growing up and stuff and finally taking all of the things that were said in books like The Help, To Kill a Mockingbird, it just really opens your eyes and helps you see the other side of that encounter.
Right. I think it's important to see that other side of that encounter, because if you don't, then you're culturally stunted.
Right. I also think one book that is really, really good, and I have yet to read it, but I have purchased it, is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. And I honestly think that that book should be taught.
I've never... What is it?
It's basically dealing with an 11-year-old in school.
Mm-hmm.
And she is obviously dealing with the blonde, blue-eyed girls and boys of America. It's also set in 1941, so it definitely puts it back into those times that especially people like our age are only hearing about. So it just gives you both perspectives, and, you know, she questions, well, why don't I have blue eyes? Why don't I have blonde hair? Why is my hair textured? Why does my skin look different from the other girls in my class? And then she really goes on to embrace who she is and her culture, which I think this book is not only good for African American students, but it's also good for people of different religions, people of different ethnicities. It's a good book for everyone to realize that there is a place for your culture within the world.
I think it's interesting that all these books are anachronisms. They all happen around World War II or World War I, but there's not a single mention of it. I don't know. I think that, I mean, in ending thoughts, I just think that these articles were really helpful in opening up and engaging in the conversation of, hey, please be aware that there are other people in the world that are not white, and that though they focus on a different culture and work on a different level socially and mentally and psychologically, and that religiously they're different, and that just because they're different from you, do not shame them. Instead, engage in conversation and understand them. And if you can't do that, if you can't be the bigger person, then please do not engage, do not even talk to them. If you are so culturally stunted that you can't be willing to have an open conversation where you're not going to immediately bash them.
Right. I think closing thoughts for me is just dealing with these articles and dealing with readings like so just really it reinforces what I want to do as a teacher. It just, you know, going into the English education realm of things, I wanted to do it because I love the subject and I love the field and I love kids. But if I go into a classroom and my kids are unhappy, that's going to make me unhappy. If they're not okay with themselves personally in any way, shape, or form, I'm not going to be okay to teach them. So reinforcing these thoughts and ideas and racism, dealing with race in general, is just one topic that has to be discussed in classes.
It does.
And creating those tough talks with kids now is so much more important than it ever has been, because we're getting rooted into the old thoughts and ideas, and they're getting brought up more than new ideas.
We are at the brink where the baby boomers are nearing, not to say extinction, but
they're leaving the school.
They're leaving the school
as
systems.
Teachers, and we are going to
need to restructure.
Yes, we need to deconstruct
and then reconstruct
what our elders have done. Not to say that our elders aren't all
wrong,
exceptional, or they're all wrong.
Not to say that they were wrong. I mean, at that time, socially, it was just unacceptable.
Right.
So,
I think just taking things like race and multiculturalism in general, it's just a new start for going into education, and I don't know.
It's a new dawn. It's a new day. That's what it is. All right.
So.
That's all. Peace.